Ragnarok has finally come to Ark Survival Ascended, with an extensive upgrade, various new tames, a bunch of new islands, and a brand new boss. Back on ASC, this was one of my favorite maps, but after years of not playing it and gorgeous new visuals, will it stand the test of time and still be my favorite? Well, to find out, I decided to spend 100 days on this Nordic landscape and to try and beat the new boss, Nunutok. Will we survive? Will we get violated by the new creatures? Will I commit heinous crimes? Find out as I survive 100 days on Ragnarok Ascended. So to start, I decided to spawn at Viking Bay on day 1, rising my extraneously buff character from the sands to greet Ragnarok's gorgeous upgrade, where I went about the normal beach bob routine, collecting fiber from the bushes, punching a single tree to get some wooden thatch, where I immediately was harassed by the locals. For some reason, they didn't like a buff naked man destroying their trees, so I ran away and I thought I had gotten rid of the feds, but I hadn't, and while I was crafting, they bit my ankles clean off and sent me straight back to the spawn menu. And good thing this ain't hardcore. So instead, I decided to spawn in Jungle Zone 1, hoping to take advantage of the resources there, primarily these small loot boxes on the water's edge, which I could harvest for some tools, getting me plenty of swords, spikes, crossbows, and other random things which I could use to progress, using this new arsenal to go about getting revenge on the locals. But they sent some pickpockets to put me in check, so yeah, I couldn't do that yet. But luckily, because they were slow, I was able to get away and continue my murder spree elsewhere, using the corpses of my victims to craft myself some hide armor. Slap a logo on that shit and they'll call it designer. Which I decided to take advantage of the new DLC content that came with the Lost Colony pre-expansion, putting on a new cosmetic skin on my hide which made me look awesome, donning a warlord-like appearance which, as I just said, was freaking awesome. And to celebrate my new gothic armor drip, I decided to kill some more locals, killing a parasaur along the way which had a child, which I claimed for some reason. I don't know why. I'd figure if I wanted a berry harvester I could just tame the parent, but whatever. Oh, and then I did the same thing with a compi- Oh, wait, no, I just killed it afterwards. Damn, that's some psychopath movement right there. Which, after a bit of beach bob shenanigans, the baby para grew up, so I put them to work immediately, gifting them a saddle and forcing them to carry my fat around the area, harvesting berries as I went to try and get a small starting collection of narco berries, which soon enough brought me to the coast of the Viking Bay once more, which I might say that this was my favorite spot on the entirety of the whole map, with gorgeous beaches, easy access to the mountains, and a gate to hell itself. Going along where I found some sand on the floor, a material that I could use to make a boomerang, which is a not so absolutely OP item which I could use to knock stuff out, so I made it, and then got assaulted by an Ornithocaris, an addition from the Prehistoric Beast series of mods, which I should say that this is probably my most modded 100 days yet, with almost 70 brand new creatures to play around with, if only they spawned. And with grit and determination, I managed to bring down this aerial hostile, and then moved on down the beach where I found an area that I liked and wanted to try and make camp for now, which I also decided to start work on another new addition from the Lost Colony pre-expansion, the Skill Tree, which required me to do certain tasks to unlock points to unlock perks, which at the moment was just basic grinding, so I went about setting up a small crafting station to get a start on said grind, also crafting myself some utilities plus gear to help as well, placing down some foundations, forges, campfires, and mortars, using the campfires to cook some meat for my big back, then going around the area to exploit the small little glossy rocks, aka my cash money metal rocks, to get a start on metal production, also adding some additions to my crafting area like a bed, which would be useful for getting back home when I inevitably died, and if you wonder what that looks like, just go watch Aberration to see what happens when I don't place a bed in the early game. Which in day 2, with the crafting station mostly set up, I decided to play around with yet another addition from Lost Colony, the new template hammer, which allowed me to pick through various assorted templates for me to build, which for a lazy boy like myself, this was a glorious tool to use. So after sifting through the templates that were available, I managed to find a template for a Viking longhouse preset, which looked really cool, so I decided I would work towards making that. And yeah, I didn't really give much thought to living somewhere else as I really wanted to live on the Viking Bay, which with this template placed, all I would need to do is get the structures to fill it in, which that would need a lot of resources, so I went about grinding, getting together the resources for a smithy, and going about getting the resources for the structures that I'd need to fill in the template, which by proxy allowed me to work on my skill points, working at crafting the starting bits of the structure where I slowly realized the actual scale of this build, which through the harvesting, crafting, and building, I was able to unlock my very first perk points, which I ignored for a little bit as I was trying to make some serious progress towards the build, which is something I was definitely not doing. And slowly I realized that I took a bigger bite than I could chew at the moment with this project, project, so I decided to shift my priorities towards getting some tames to further help me advance, wanting to try and get some harvesters to assist me in both construction and general grinding, which just up the beach was Death Valley. Now, I know that name makes it sound bad, which it is, but I knew I could possibly find doeds and Ankies up there, so I took a shot, heading up the beach and into the valley where indeed I did find some Ankies, one which was awful, but the other was actually pretty good, so with my boomerang, I proceeded to play Skull Simulator and knock them out. You know, for someone who's trying to get monetized, you're not really speaking family-friendly there, bud. Giving it some berries and then went about waiting for it to tame, which to pass the time, I went about trying to get some bodyguards from the local fauna, which went wrong in almost every single way, as I failed to knock anything out in my endeavors, and some vultures crept down the hill, scared me away from getting anything interesting. But I still wanted to do something, so I went the other way along the mountain ridge heading northward, going on a killing spree where I found nothing to tame, but did get me my first tributes, which, learning my lesson from extinction, I knew that I would want to start saving them as soon as possible, where soon enough my new Anki tamed up. So I went about the journey of bringing it back home. For 5 seconds, as this boy was too slow for my liking. I do not have the attention span for this. So I decided that I wanted to go out and get some crystal for dino balls from the Dino Depot mod, which to find I would need a Terra. So I went around the beaches looking for some, killing turtles along the way to get keratin for a saddle, but eventually found a couple on the western shore, including a level 105, which was good enough for me, so I went about taming it, and then found that I was too fat to ride it. So I tried to force it to a tree by vigorously humping the ground and then biting said tree to level its weight, just enough to allow it to carry me, naming my new mount Dumb as Fucker. Now with this new flying mount, I went around looking for that crystal, heading up into the mountains where I'd hope I'd find some, avoiding all the nastiness below, and at the peak of Death Valley, I found a bee! Yes, finally, the curse is broken!
We can finally be bees. This is good news.
Though my search for crystal took me into the snowy mountains above, where in the mouth of a cave, I managed to find just a scant amount of crystal, but it was enough for some balls. Ayo, pause. So with that, I went back down to collect my Anki, catching my not Pokemon and abandoning the para as I was too lazy to walk it home as it had resources in its inventory. Dropping by a blue drop, which gave me some decent stuff, and then heading out on a taming run, mainly with the mind to try and tame a Rex. Now, you may wonder, how the fuck am I gonna be able to tame a Rex without any tranks? Which I reply, fuck you. Well, luckily for me, I was going after the Evo Rex, a modded overhaul of the creature which didn't require knocking out to tame, which count me even luckier, for up in the mountains, I managed to find one, which I decided to try and tame, following a pretty simple taming process. Kill something, bring that body before the Rex and it will consume it, and unlike a Karcha, it will not violate you for it, instead becoming your friend, and will wander around until it roars, which then you must stand still, or then it will violate you. And then hopefully, if its AI works, it should approach you and take some food from your inventory to progress the tame, which if you're blind and can't see the screen, I went about doing this. Which while doing that, Dumb as Fucker got assaulted by another Evo Rex, though they were doing a really good job at keeping themselves alive. So I tried to progress my Evo Rex into the second stage of taming as fast as possible to save it, but just as I gained its trust and went out to save my flyer, they died. But I did manage to avenge my lost comrade, which allowed me to tame my very first Rex, which itself was very cool, but now I would need another Terra. So yeah, I went around looking for another one, where instead I found another Evo Rex, which if I can tame one, why not two? The answer to that is because there was nothing I could feed it, so I had to try and bolt past it, sneaking around it and parachuting down the mountain. We're down along the way, I then found some Terras along the cliffs, so I went about taming them, after getting jump scared by an aloe, of course. Around, I guess. Oh, no. But I managed to knock one of them out and waited for it to tame, basking at the astonishing beauty of Ragnarok's sunsets. Honestly, I gotta say, they knocked it out of the park with this one. And then the Terra tamed, but my obesity was showing. So I just had it follow me as I parachuted back home, arriving there in day 3 with my new companions, where after some grinding, my game crashed. Luckily, only a couple minutes, so I didn't lose anything, and then it crashed again, which was annoying, so I decided to take a break. Coming back to find some of the metal in my forges had cooked, so I went about using that metal to craft my brand new Rex a saddle. That's actually crazy. I got a Rex on day 3. But I was not done yet with my taming ambitions, still needing a plethora of different harvesters to assist me. So I went back out to go on a taming spree, with the mind for a decent berry harvester, as I would need a lot of drugs for my Colombian conch, my sleepy goop. So I went out and found an Alpha Rex. Yeah, boy, run me that fade. So with my new companion, I went about fighting it, which went pretty well as the Alpha was low level, and I managed to kill it with an air of confidence. confidence. Heading back out, where eventually I found a level stego, which, still not having tranks, I decided to settle for it as maybe it would help me get some. So I went about harassing it with my aerial bonk stick and knocking it out to start taming it, which while waiting for it to do so, I decided to work on my perks again, which needed me to tame some more herbivores. So I decided to tame some listros. These won't be mentioned again, but I'm pretty sure they die. Though they did help me get some perk points, which I used to get the first level of a perk called Speedy Harvester, which is exactly what it sounds like. And then using one spare level for Hot Blooded, which isn't what it sounds like at all. Which after the stego tamed up, I brought it back home, slapped on a saddle, and immediately put my new slave to work. I mean friend to work. Where I quickly learned that that new Speedy Harvester perk, yeah, it works on dinos too. That's busted. What were you thinking, Wildcard? And actually, you know what? Thank you very much. I love it. Which this new perk would make my harvesting endeavors go way faster and also sped up this fat bastard. Going forth with the berry run in quick fashion, where I managed to get a decent stash of narco berries, which I needed for my drugs. Taking them to the pestles and going about the crafting of a ton of that, as I had already been collecting spoiled meat thus far. Your boy is getting smarter. And while waiting for that to craft, I went about getting some more perk points as I really wanted to get a fully leveled Speedy Harvester skill, which required me to craft some random things, and figuring I was already crafting stuff, I also worked on getting some more structures for the template, eventually getting 3 more points, which I put towards another level of Speedy Harvester and some more Hot Blooded, which by then a decent bit of narcotics had crafted, so I took those to make some legendary trank arrows from the returning extra tranks mod, which this would allow me to go on a taming spree, which I went to go do as I really wanted to get my hands on some harvesters to further assist me in the construction of the house so far, as I hadn't even done 10% of it, and doing it on foot was a pain in the ass. Dropping by an Alpha Raptor, which would be good EXP, so I curb stomped it, which while doing that, chat asked me to name the Rex Cupcake, which, why not? Doesn't hurt anything, even though it's a boy. And with that, I wanted to go around with the Rex for a little to have some fun, where I learned that the Speedy Harvester buff also applied to dead bodies, which made this even more busted, and I cannot lie, I absolutely love it. So I went forth on a killing spree, until I got bored. So I switched back to the Terra, naming them Blank Park at a viewer's request, and then heading back out to look around, where I put another new mod to use, the Dino Finder, which since this was single player, it was kind of broken, but it still helped me as it listed dinos that had been spawned in that I may not have seen, which with it I found a level 140 Doad, which I went, found, and knocked the fuck out. And while waiting for that, Blank Park was killed by a terror bird. Damn it, how fragile are these damn birds, dude? But at least I found that I had a chibi, equipping it to start harvesting EXP from alphas, and I found I had a cool skin for Cupcake. No, wait. Yo, what's up, Cupcake? What's up, Cupcake? How you doing? Which then I found some Terras, which I knocked out to replace Blank, and to have a spare for what was probably inevitably gonna happen, which while taming them, the doe had tamed. And then so did the Terras in day 4, so I saddled one, balled the other, and went back out for more taming, postponing my search for a harvester to try and find a good Ornithocaris, as these Terras were really getting annoying. I mean, seriously, why are you made out of plastic? But for that, I would need its saddle, which needed pearls and paste, both which could be found in beaver dams. So I went out to look for some, and instead of a beaver, I found a level 130 female Rex, which I definitely couldn't ignore, so I went about trying to tame them, using an aloe body as tribute, befriending them, feeding them when they roared, and gaining its trust to ride it so I could go on a killing spree. Which while doing that, I spotted a level 150 male Rex just up the hill, so after wrapping up the female tame, I went up to tame the male as well, which went much the same as the last, adding yet another Rex to my fold, and already having a breeding pair of Rexes. Insane progress, dude. And I decided to take the female as my new pocket, naming her Stalker and giving her some funny glasses. Stalker got that swag, though. Which I couldn't just tame her and not play with her, so I went about going on a killing spree, only to remember what I was actually doing. So I went back to that, finding some beaver dams just upriver, and I spotted an Alpha Carno too. And since Stalker was still low, I decided to play Jump Jitsu and killed that mofo. Then raiding the beaver dams, which gave me just what I needed for the Ornithocaris saddle. So eagerly, I went out to go and find one, finding just what I wanted, attacking my base. Though I managed to get an arrow into it, hopefully knocking it out, but no, it didn't. It wasn't enough, and so it began to ran off. But I wasn't gonna let them get away, chasing them down all along the northern coast of Rag until I was able to finally knock it out, taming my very first Ornithocaris, which I named them Big Bird. And immediately, it was a dramatic improvement, having insane stamina and weight, which just lifted away all my current traveling problems. And then I found another one. Yeah, why not? Let's have two. So I knocked that one out to have much the same problems as the first, but this time I could fire from the back of Big Bird, so it was much easier and faster to knock this one out. Taming it shortly thereafter and heading back home, throwing out all my new friends and then getting back to my drug grind. Are you proud of me, Papo Escobar? Wanted to get my hands on more trank arrows as I wanted to go on another taming run to get more harvesters, mainly a fairy, to assist me in finishing the construction of this horrid fucking template. Yes, these are useful, but why is it such a pain in the ass to build? So getting the drugs, I went out to go and try and find one, and instead found an Alpha Rex, which I killed with Stalker, which leveled up my chibi. Then heading back out to look just for curiosity to get the better of me, so I took a dip into Murder Snow, where I found a gaggle fuck of wyverns, no egg, and that my balls were gone from frostbite, so I left as quick as I came. And for some reason, I was having a hard time finding any fairies, so while I was looking, I went and got some metal and some drops, which had some decent stuff, but that nearly got me killed. Whoa, big bird, big bird, big bird, help, 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 let me on, let me on, let me on! Ooh. Where by day 5, I had found one of the brand new islands which had come with Rag on ASA near the swamp, which there I found some bison that got curb stomped by a Rex. But I found some more in the hills, which I decided to go about taming, knocking out 2 of them and waiting for them to, well, tame. But the perk points were calling my name, so I played Kidnapping Simulator to try and get some more, claiming a baby Bronto that totally wasn't orphaned by me, and then a Doed and a Serato, which completed the tasks and got me some more points for my perks. Man, the FBI think I'm gonna be talking about drugs. No, I just want my fucking speedy harvester levels, dude. Which soon enough the bison tamed, throwing them in some Pokeballs, getting some crystal, and then deciding to go back home. Where on my way back, I came across a level 145 Rex, which I could not pass up. So I went about taming it, killing something, and giving it tribute, but at the exact moment I fed it, a raptor attacked, which pissed it off, and it tried to start killing me. Which in fact, it nearly did, as I frantically ran back to Big Bird and flew away to wait for it to calm down. Which eventually it did, and I went about the taming method, getting it tamed, and then heading back home. Which from there, I did some berry harvesting, and then after that, I went back out to look for theories. Heading to the canyons, as I remembered in ASC, they were common there, which my gut was right, and I found a pretty decent one, which I went about knocking out and taming. All I needed to do now was wait. So I went around exploring, where I found some ice wyverns up on the mountains above, which I ended up getting too close and ended up getting assaulted. Luckily, Big Bird's a badass and was able to handle them. So I went on doing some looting, which led me into the Green Ob Plains, where I found a Giga, a vanilla one. That shouldn't exist! I have a mod that shouldn't exist! But for some reason, here was a vanilla one, so yeah, that wasn't cool, and honestly was probably an omen for the bugginess of the spawns of the entire map, as you'll find out throughout this video. And just a little further on into the plains, there was another fade, so I ran it eagerly. Which after a bunch of looting, the theory finally tamed. So I went back to collect them, and with the theory done and the concerning behavior of spawns, I decided to go ahead and do a dino web to try and fix them. Heading back home with the plan to try and get that template done, except instead I got distracted by my loot goblin and went looting, and then running the fade with an Alpha Rex, which took me all the way south to the southern desert archipelago, which had been expanded with some new islands, including one which had a cove with some Karkinos in it. That's actually dope as hell, which I took note of for the future. And while down in the south, I also found a really good RG, which I went ahead and tamed, knowing that I would need one for grinding in the future. Then, only then, did I finally go back home, getting back in day 6, where I went about getting the saddles for my Doed and the Theory so that I could go about finishing the template house. Cause yeah, it was about time to stop being homeless. Getting them saddled, where I went about getting a bunch of resources, getting wood and fiber with the Theory, then stone with the Doed, and taking those resources to craft all the components of the house. Which, because of how confusing the list was, it took a while. So I spent the entire day working towards getting the build done, where eventually I managed to do so. Wow, it actually looked really good. So I went about moving all my stuff inside and adding some additional storage and forges. Don't know if I'm gonna use this tool again, but it's cool. Which with these new forges, I wanted to immediately put them to use. So grabbing the Anki and the RG, crafting myself some flak armor, I went out to go on a metal run, planning on making my way to the desert, specifically a place which I dubbed Pride Rock, a mountain which on ASC had a massive stockpile of metal, and I wanted to exploit the fuck out of that. Arriving at the desert's edge in day 7, where I decided to get a start on the metal run in the surrounding area around the rock before ultimately heading there for the main stockpile. But when I threw out my RG, I realized that I never made them a saddle. So yeah, I would need to do that, which the main resource of concern was chitin. So I went around looking for something that I could harvest it from, and of course I grabbed some metal with my pickaxe to not completely waste my time. Where along my searches, I ended up finding an anthill, an addition from the Untamables mod, which essentially allowed me to tame all the non-tameable creatures for unique abilities, and ants gave chitin. So I went about attacking them, where an almost infinite infinite stream of them poured out, giving me plenty of chitin for the saddle so that I could finally get my bird mounted up and went about doing the metal run proper, clearing through any metal I could find in the cliff-ridden desert edge until I slowly made my way towards Pride Rock. Though to my sore disappointment, I found that the metal spawns had been significantly nerfed there. The only scant amount of metal that I could find being within the hollow cave under the rock, which thankfully with that and the amount that I had gotten around the surrounding desert edge was enough to sustain my needs for now. So I left the rock at least a little content, not before naming the Argy and the Anki, Raven and Annie respectively. Getting back in the mid-morning with my stash where I realized a flaw to my house. There wasn't a way to get any of my small harvesters in, which as I was not about to walk in a ton of metal on foot, I went about taking down one of the walls and placing a dino gate so that Annie could get access to the forges inside, which they in turn needed a fuel source to cook all the metal, so I took some flint and stone that I'd gotten during the run from Annie and used it to start making spark powder, which then I remembered I would need charcoal anyways, so I ended up just using wood for the forges instead, filling them up both with the fuel and the metal, where by doing so I found that I had gotten 29,000 ingots worth of metal. And with that cooking, I turned my attention to my harvesters once more, needing to get my hands on a better berry harvester than the mid-stego that I had at the moment. So I wanted to get my hands on a root, heading down southward to find some in the southern sands, dropping by the canyon real quick to get some crystal, and then continuing on, eventually getting to the desert archipelago where they spawned the most in day 8. Which, true to what I just literally fucking said, I was able to find a decent root pretty quickly, knocking them out and feeding them some shrooms to start taming, though its melee stat was kinda sucky raw, so I decided to try and get another one just in case the stat roll didn't go in my favor. Looking around the rugged islands, but I wasn't able to find a decent one before my root tamed, which thankfully it had some pretty decent stats, but it wouldn't hurt to have another one, so I went about looking for some more. Finding a decent male, which I knocked out, force-fed it shrooms, and it tamed promptly. Itself getting some even better stats, which with that I was content, so I went and left to go and find another critical harvester for the playthrough. A megatherium for mass chitin harvesting for future cementing paste production. So I went and flew to the small redwoods area next to the green ob, for none to spawn, so I went to the main redwoods, where I still couldn't find any, so I went to the new redwoods island just next to the main biome to see if they could spawn there, and then they did not. Scouring through the trees until I finally decided to give up. However, a thought experiment had been stirring in my mind ever since I found those ants while getting the Argy saddle. It didn't really seem like there was a limit to how many soldiers could spawn when you attacked the hive, and theoretically, just like their naturally spawning counterparts, they gave resources. So I wondered if I could get cementing paste from them if I harvested them with a frog, which could possibly give me access to an infinite cementing paste farm. So I decided to drop by the Nile River in the desert to find me a frog, which I was able to find one of them on the banks of the river, knocking out the little froggo and feeding it to tame. And I was eager to test out my hypothesis as quick as possible, so I went back home as quick as possible, arriving at base, unloading the spoils of my journey, and then getting both the root and the frog a saddle, which then I went out to test my froggo boy, but instead found an Alpha Rex. You get the fuck out of my way. Which nearby the dead op, I found me an anthill to test my theory with, which worked almost flawlessly. While yes, the frog was able to get cementing paste and was great at it, and yes, there was an infinite amount of ants, the problem was there was an infinite amount of ants, which slowly and surely minced through the small health pool of my froggo, which forced me to end the cementing paste run before they died. Maybe this would be viable in the future when my frog was healed and leveled up, but right now wouldn't be the best idea. Though I was able to get myself a few thousand cementing paste, which was cool. And no, we're not doing the joke. I am so fucking tired of it. Getting back home in day 9 with my cache of cementing paste, the crystal from the canyon, and my new ruse, which all of these would be perfect components to help me get a farm up and running, which now that I knew bees were spawning in, I would finally be able to make this farm fruitful. So I first went about getting the materials that I would need to make the foundation for said farm. Getting some more wood with the theory and still having a bunch of stone from the doughed, I went about crafting and placing the foundational extension to my home, carving out a part of the side of my house to make an entrance, then crafting and placing the greenhouse structures to make the external skeleton of the farm, then making some crop plots. Are you tired of the word then yet? Cause then I would need 2 more things to finish my farm. I would need vegetable seeds to plant them, and I would need some dung beetles to make fertilizer. So I went out to go and get those, heading towards the volcano as that's where I knew I could find some, where I was quickly able to, with the help of the Dino Finder mod, taming myself 2 of them and then moving on to the highlands so that I could get a bunch of berries and seeds with my room. Which this berry run went into day 10, where I managed to get all the seeds that I needed plus a very substantial stash of narco berries. So content with that, I went to go back home. But flying along the coast, the scarred red gleams of fire taunted my eyes, and not 3 seconds after leaving the highlands, I decided to take a shot at getting some wyvern eggs. Cause yes, I'm still that money-hungry dragon boy, diving through the lava-ridden trench as fast as I could to try and find some eggs, dodging past wyverns where I was able to find a lightning egg that turned out to be level 30, so yeah, I wasn't finna leave without getting another one. So I dove back into the den, evading the swarms of wyverns which stalked and chased me as I flew through, looking through the hellscape until I managed to find myself a fire wyvern egg, which itself turned out to be level 115. Though because of how well Big Bird was evading the dragons and their attacks, I decided to try and get some more eggs. Playing a game of cat cat and mouse as I dove around and dodged fire, lightning, and acid attacks to get another fire wyvern egg, which with that I was content and finally left the confines of the den, and once a safe distance away, I looked at that third egg to find that it was level 165. A true future-born monster in the making, so I was happy. Oh, and then I found a shit pig in the highlands, so I yoinked it. Yeah, it'd be useful, so why not? Getting back home with my spoils, where I ended up getting distracted by my perk quests again, which wanted me to tame some herbivores. So I went around to try and tame some dodos. It didn't really go well, but I did manage to kidnap a kid, which completed the task, and then I proceeded to kill it. Officer, you gotta believe me, the dodo had a knife, I had to! Which with that done, I got back on track, planting the seeds in the crop plots, planting salve roots, citronal, long grass, and rock carrot, then using those nocra berries to make more liquid sleep. And after having done all of this, my frog had healed up, so I wanted to take another shot at that cementing paste method again, finding myself an anthill nestled up in the mountain paths, and then going about the process of attacking them for their natural resources, blaming them for their aggression, bombing their hospitals, and getting their paste. So yeah, I went and killed them, got a bunch of paste, but even with my frog being exponentially stronger than before, they were starting to get the better of me. And having gotten a decent amount so far, and probably killing enough of them to classify it as a genocide, I decided to just end the confrontation there, breaking the anthill and finding a queen, which was interesting. Which after a Google, I learned that it only needed bee honey to tame, so I took a mental note of that for later, and for now, I could only feed this one 9mm. Returning home with my supply of mashed bug guts and stashing it away for later use. Finding the farm was going up pretty well, and that the beetles were starting to make fertilizer as well. But I wanted a bee now, and that would need gilly gear and flowers, so I went up to the snow to get some organic polymer. Crafting some ghillie armor and finding that I had already had the flowers, so I went to go and get some bees. Finding Barry B. Benson, enslaving them, throwing them in a Pokeball, finding his wife, doing the same, and now I have 2 bees. Oh, and he did have a son, but I killed him. It was on accident, though. I'm not a complete psychopath. Now with the farm fully up and running, I decided to start getting to work on taming a really cool creature from one of my mods. A returning draconic beast, the Zoldrir dragons. Which it would be pretty much criminal to not get one on the map that pretty much takes place in fantasy Scotland. But that guy would need ovis to tame, and they would need veggie cakes, which they would need honey, and honey takes a while to make. And also I needed stimulant and sap, so I went about using a bunch of stim berries and spark powder I had made to make some of that. Then I went out to go and get that sap, which normies would head to the redwoods and tap those trees, but knowledgeable gentlemen like myself would know that in the desert you can get some special trees there which when harvested will give a considerable amount of sap. So I went to go there, passing by a Terra getting swarmed by a gaggle fuck of griffins, and then I got harassed by some ice wyverns on my way through the snow. Though Stalker proved to be far more than enough to handle them, which piqued my curiosity to try and find some eggs from them, so I went around the nearby area to try and find some, killing wyverns and finding no eggs. But in day 11, I found some fuck-ass wyverns trying to kill big birds, so I went about saving my companion, killing off the wyverns with Stalker, which marked the end of my journey in the snow. Continuing on to the desert, where I went about finding those trees, flipping off the Lorax and cutting down a bunch of them, which after a bit of harvesting, I'd managed to get an acceptable amount of sap, so I went and left the desert. Ooh, look, a piece of candy. Which within this drop, it gave me an Ascendant Pump Shotgun. Yes! Which this would serve me very well in the many more crimes I wished to commit. But when I got home with my sap and my war crime stick, I found that the bees had still not made any honey. But I guess seeing that shotgun changed their minds, and they made me some on the spot. So I went about using the very few bits of honey that I had to make a scant amount of veggie cakes. Making some conserving bins so that the cakes wouldn't spoil before I could use them, as unfortunately I feared with how slow the honey was being made, that I wouldn't have enough cakes to tame the ovis that I would need. And I knew it was going to be a while before I would have enough honey to do that, so unfortunately I was going to have to shelf the idea of getting a Zoldrir dragon just for now. Instead, taking those 2 decent level fire wyverns to hatch out my first draconic steeds of the playthrough, which the level 15 was kinda bland, but the level 165 came out with a gorgeous shade of red and yellow, which looked amazing. And since the Zoldrir dragon was being put on the back burner, I decided to get myself another form of power. Big Af Mouth. I wanted a Dinosuchus, as they were hella fun on my center playthrough, check that out by the way, especially for a certain artifact at the bottom of the ocean. So I flew to the swamp with my new wyvern, which I had named Firelight, to go and get me one, where pretty quickly I found a level 130 female, which I went about trying to tame. Which to tame one of these guys, you basically gotta stalk it like a weirdo. What you doing there, big boy? Then wait for it to get lazy and sit down, which it'll open its jaws, which honestly I'm fully convinced that they do this because they know you're nearby, which is honestly a terrifying thought. And when they do that, you go up to their face and slap some meat on it, which if they don't bite your hands off, it'll start taming it. So on about this frankly super dangerous task of feeding this living vice meat until I finally tamed it with some pretty solid stats. Bringing her home as fast as I could, where I decided to name her Jolene. No, not Jawline, Jolene. Get it right. But getting her a saddle, as I wanted to use this living death machine as soon as possible, which to first test her out, I decided to go and cleanse the nearby Utrid population under the bay, which to say there was a complete infestation of those guys. Like seriously, what the hell is this? And so I went about the extermination, where I went about killing hundreds of them, which I'm fairly certain is not an exaggeration. Managing to get a bunch of pearls, both black and white, cause this ain't the 50s, y'all.
Bubble, you can't say that.
And a bunch of chitin, and a treasure map. So I wanted to go ahead and get that, but I ended up getting ganked by some wyverns on the way, which I had to kill. And in the aftermath, for some reason, Firelight decided to throw me into the back rooms. Yeah, Wildcard, you really might want to fix that. Which then I found that treasure chest. Which me and Firelight went on a wonderful time trying to just find anything to do. Where I thought about trying to get a Drakeling, which wasn't really showing up on the Dino Finder, but it did show me some Veilvins, including a level 150, which these new additions would be fun to play with, so I decided to go ahead and try and get one of those guys. Getting into the Snowy Mountains area where Oda was at, where there was a bunch of nastiness, so I went about clearing out the area, and killed the Veilwind on accident. Luckily it had kids. No worries guys, you ain't gonna be orphans for long. Which from there I started kinda getting bored and was just wandering around, so on day 13 I decided to go and try and get an artifact, which on ASE used to be near my base, the Artifact of the Strong, which of course I failed to find as in ASA it had been moved to the Wyvern's Cove, which, while kind of annoying at the time, I gotta say it was probably a good and interesting choice to do so. So I went home to go play around with my new pets, which I found that they were another companion creature which worked like the Armadagos in Extinction, though much the same, I didn't really care for this feature, and even with the buff they provided, which was kinda minimal, I didn't really care, so yeah, just getting a Pokeball. And then my Stego got assaulted by a Utrid, which for some reason I decided to tame via the Untamables mod, where I learned that I could ride it, which was interesting, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, enough of that dumb shit. I went about being productive, taking Firelight out to go and get that artifact that I wanted from the Wyvern Cove, making my way there and then inside, which the upgrade to this cave was honestly astonishing, but the gagglefuck of wyverns were a bit distracting. So I went about fighting and killing them to clear them out, where I managed to get some eggs while I was there going through the cave, getting 4 fire wyvern eggs and 1 poison egg, which with those I felt comfortable just focusing my attention on the main goal of being there, the artifact. So I looked around the cave, found the ruins, and collected my very first one, the Strunk. Wow, that was easy. I hope the caves don't get exponentially more difficult. So I went and left the cove, fleeing from the ire of 1,000 pissed off baby mamas, where I decided to try and complete my set, heading into the snow to try and get my very first ice wyvern eggs. Arriving at the horde of ice wyverns in day 14, where I went about vibe checking them all. They all failed. Stepping past their corpses to try and find their unborn children, just to find that they weren't any, so I wasted my time, man. So instead I went to the Highlands to try and see if I could tame an Ovis with a cake that I had gotten from a drop, which first I found an Ovis with a baby, which, oh yeah, I forgot, ASA is really white van simulator. So I killed the parent, stole the child, had a witness, got rid of the witness, stole their child too, and then I tamed an Ovis with a veggie cake, which with the baby in this one I now had a breeding pair, so that was neat. And from there I kinda dawdled in the Highlands, but I found a Karcher which would be a great thing to kill. We leaving Karchers back in Extinction for now, boys. Using my fire breath, I managed to bring it down and acquire its heart, heading back home successful. Though I really wanted to head back out for some more taming, so I went about doing some preparation, setting up the Ovis to breed, even though that the children would starve while I was gone, and then crafting myself some extra trank arrows and some preparation for an extremely special tame. So, the Untamable mod makes everything untamable tameable, right? And if I remember correctly, there's a desert on Rag, right? You might see where I'm going with this. I wanted to tame a Deathworm, which to do so I needed a special trap for it, and some drums to lure it in. So I went ahead and made those, and went out towards the desert to attempt taming one of them. Though on the way I came across some ice wyverns which had an egg, though it was only level 65. Oh well, I got to the desert in day 15, walking the sands with Stalker, as before I could tame a Deathworm I would need to kill a decent few of them, as apparently these guys are cannibals. Where in my journeys I found where all of my modded creatures were apparently. From Postasuchus to Dracovinator, Edmontosaurus, and many others. I don't know why nowhere else, but they're fucking here. Even finding an Alpha Dracovinator, which was dope, and I killed it because Stalker craved the souls of the strong. Going on throughout the desert sands, killing Deathworms along the way, finding a decent level one as well, but it wouldn't leave me alone, so I had to cancel this one's life subscription. And then I came across an Alpha Edmontosaurus. Man, that's a big ass boy right there. And this time Jawline was hungry for a soul, so I threw her out and went about using her Gigabyte to get rid of the Alpha shins. And you know what? As if there wasn't enough in this desert, I found a max level Pedophilosaur, I mean Meraxes, which this sucker could be tamed by feeding it children. I don't make the cementing paste joke, but there's still ditties! Which, there were some future orphans nearby. So, I went ahead and committed some crimes and fed this Podinosaurus some innocence. Taming this monster, which had turned out well with a melee stat of 51. Must have been the nutrients from the children's tears. Anyways, I finally had enough horns and found a level 120 Deathworm, which I wanted to try and take a shot at taming. Placing the trap and using the drums to lure it in, which it went under the trap and just waited underground for me. So, you know any good— Whoa, holy shit! Spawning back at base, I grabbed Firelight and flew back to the desert, getting back to where I died and seeing that they were trying to kill Stalker, even dragging her underground. Thankfully, the game bugged and she didn't die, but holy shit, that scared the absolute hell out of me. So I committed some crimes that would make even Germany cringe and cleared out the danger, but now I would need to find another worm. Oh look, another worm! So I went about trying to tame that one, which I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice when I lured it in. This time, I would get on my Wyvern for safety, so I beat the drums, lured it to the trap, which it didn't work at first. So I led it around and then managed to trap it, quickly racing to tame it, managing to defeat it, but I was almost immediately dragged into the abyss by a worm. We'll be right back with the raging after a word from our sponsor, me. So recently, your boy has gotten monetized, which with that includes access to memberships. Yes, I'm about to beg you for money. If you actually like this content and want early access to future videos, special attention from me, access to custom emojis that you can use in chat, a digital pat on the head, whatever that means, and possible future exclusive content, y'all should really think about joining my members page. Currently, there's only 2 levels, but I do have plans to add more, which will give you all access to many new perks on my channel, from aforementioned exclusive content, to getting to play with me on stream, access to uncut or unseen footage, and even possible access to a future Ark cluster, where you will be able to get to play with me on our very own server. The future possibilities are endless, and I would deeply support any of y'all who decide to join and support. However, if you can't do that, that's fine. You watching the video is enough for me. Though, you could like and sub, that's free. You can do that, please. Anyways, back to our scheduled dumb shittery. Respawning in day 16, where I went about getting some gear and a saddle for one of my other Rexes to act as muscle for the fight to reclaim my dragon, where I realized that the Deathworm was at 96% taming effectiveness, just shy of instant taming, which, you know, made me very salty, as I wouldn't have minded dying if I had in fact tamed it, but you know what can you do? So I went about getting back to the scene of my death, using the Rex I had saddled to help in defending Firelight, which during the battle they got dragged under the sands and killed, which that was the max level Rex I tamed before, so yeah, I was gonna need to get another one of those. But I managed to clear away the fodder worms and pacify the max level Deathworm. So I went about resetting the tame to try and get it trapped again, beating the drums and waiting for it to get trapped, which it looked like it did get trapped, but in fact it had not, even though Deathworms were summoned in anyways. Which then I tried to get on my Wyvern, which I couldn't for some fucking reason. So they dragged me back to hell. Yeah, I'm not letting Ark dick me like that. With chat's consent, I went about trying to give myself God mode, which didn't work worth dick, as the worm still killed me, and in fact when I respawned and used GCM to get back, yes I did, cause nuh-uh, I found that it did 2 million damage to kill me. So then I went back to my Wyvern and tried to collect them, where I realized that it wasn't the worm who got trapped, but it was Firelight that did, somehow. Yeah, that ain't bullshit at all. Which makes even less sense when you figure that it called Deathworms for my Wyvern, not the Deathworm, my Wyvern getting trapped. So in lieu of that, I went about trying to trap the worm again with some new traps that I totally didn't just pull out of my ass. And went about doing so, just for the motherfucking thing to not be affected by the trap. This bitch just wiggling through my trap like it's fucking nothing, bro, what the hell? But fortunately, after some brute forcing of it, I managed to get it trapped, which this time I used my brain and waited for the worms, which when they came, I killed them all and went down to tame my very first worm, just for another Deathworm to yoink me right after. Oh, whatever, I have the worm now, it doesn't matter. So at home, I made a saddle for my spare Ornithocaris and went back to collect my brand new Deathworm, retrieving them from a bloody battle, thoroughly exhausted, enraged, and happy that I wouldn't have to deal with Deathworms for a long time. So I went back home, where on the journey home, I managed to get a level 170 Ice Wyvern egg, and a bunch of treasure maps where I didn't really get anything notable, so we're just gonna forget about that. Getting back home with all my spoils, where I've dubbed my new monstrosity Death. Get it? Because Deathworm. Getting both them and the Meraxes a saddle, and then went about playing with my new spoils. First with Death, learning that this beast had insane health and weight, which was good as this guy also acted like a fucking Fasallo. When buried under the ground, anything above would be harvested, and unlike a Fasallo, that meant everything, which was insane. Getting an immense amount of various resources, including flint and metal. And if that wasn't broken enough, this guy was OP as fuck, doing insane damage comparable to my Gigas and Karchus back on Extinction, which, to paint a picture, this video was recorded with half the stats of my Island series, which itself was halved from Extinction. So this worm was doing almost 7,000 damage at a 1/4 of the damage potential of my Gigas back on extinction. Dude, what the fuck is this worm made out of? Not to mention that he could also grab things and drag them underground to do almost 30k damage. Dude, imagine if that was unnerfed. Bro would be able to one-shot a freaking Dreadnoughtus. Getting back home in day 17 with an insane amount of resources. And then I went about using the Meraxes, which I decided to aptly name Epsteinosaurus. So I went ahead and tried them out, but honestly, for 51 melee, this was kind of flimsy. Not a great nab at all. Oh well, guess another reason to fake a sewer slide. Which, having finished my fun taming, it was back to grinding, which I needed crystal for a fabricator and more dino balls. So I went out with Big Bird to go and try and find some, heading to the canyon where I thought I would find a surplus, especially into the center spire, which used to have an artifact, though this place was heavily nerfed, and I was only able to get a little bit of crystal there. So I went on looking for some more, which I found some in the snow biome, gathering some, and then seeing a shiny, which I went to go and get. And said shiny was near some ice wyverns and their eggs. And we know what happens when you leave a Bobma and a baby dino in the same room. Heading back to the spire to try and scrounge up even the littlest bit more crystal, and then finding even more ice wyvern eggs. Yeah, y'all don't get child privileges anymore. Give me that shit. And after that, I decided that I had enough crystal for what I wanted. So I made myself a stockpile of dino balls at home, and then started up the breeding operation for the Ovis, as I wanted to start making actual headway towards the Zaldria dragon, and using the leftover crystal to make myself some fabricators to start my way to the next phase of Ark. Man, I should really think of a better way to say to make industrial gear, huh? Putting them upstairs where I realized that I was running out of space for stuff and was most likely gonna need an expansion soon. But that's for later. Now is for launching babies out of uteral sheep cannons. Raising babies into day 19, which went as follows. I makes them smash, I watches them smash, they launch the baby into the Middle East, I take baby, I do a reverse China, saving the girls for breeding, and taking the boys to be sacrificed to the living fire demon. And this heinous process continued into the afternoon, which I had gotten an acceptable amount of sheep to sacrifice, so I went out with Firelight to search for some Zaldria dragons in the desert, as I had spotted some out there before. Arriving in the evening, where I went about searching the borderlands and the rocklands near Pride Rock. However, even into day 20, I hadn't found anything, so I decided to broaden my search to the greater map, hoping that they might spawn in other mountainous terrain. First heading near the Wyvern Cove, then around the mountains bordering the southeastern edge of the desert, and then moving on to the mountains on the new island near the swamp, and then moving to the canyon, because it kind of looked like mountains, and then to the snowy peaks and Murder Snow, and then the new Redwood Islands mountain, then looking at the highlands, and then its expansion, and then the plateau on said expansion. And at this fucking rate, I looked the whole map over just to find diddly squat. So defeated and figuring I wouldn't find one for a while, I decided to just give up looking and hope I would find one while I was doing something else. Though just before getting home, I found a level 125 Dreadmare, which would be a decent amount to have, so I went ahead and killed it for its altar so that I could tame it in the future. Getting back home, where I went about hatching the best of my wyvern eggs to help me cope with the fact that I wasn't allowed to have a Zaldria dragon for some reason. Why, Ark? You test me, and that's not a safe place to be. Raising those guys, which will never be mentioned again, and making myself an indie forge. But as I went about clearing space for it, the realization that I would need an expansion was becoming all the more clear. So I knew I would need to get ahead on that, but I didn't really know what I wanted to make, so I spent some time just staring at the space I had to try and figure out something. Which most of my ideas would need a lot of resources, which meant that I would need an upgrade to my harvester catalog. And on the forefront of my mind on that was a Karkinos, along with a second Doed and an Anki and a Megaloceros for thatch. So with the list of creatures that I needed, I went about gathering together the components of a trap. Just some stone gateways, a bear trap, and a cannon. Which said cannon needed munitions, which needed gunpowder, which I hadn't crafted yet. Luckily though, I had the resources to make it, but now I would need to wait for it to be made. So I went about just going after the other creatures that I needed, using the Dino Finder to locate a level 125 Doed in the desert which had some solid melee. Which along my way at the bordering mountains of the desert, I found a Zaldria dragon, which was level 90, so I went about trying to tame it, but I only had one Ovis on me, so I would have to shelf that idea a little bit longer. So I want to go to the Doed, which was just down the hill in day 22. Going about taming it, where after it did so, I used the Dino Finder to locate a level 150 Anki in the Death Valley. Going to it, yoinking it, dropping it off of my house, putting a roofie into its skull, stuffing some berries up its ass, and then waiting for it to tame. What the fuck was that? But I noticed something strange. The tracker tag from that dragon said that it was 50% finished taming, somehow, which made me curious, so I went ahead and got some Ovis for sacrifice and went out to go and try and see if I could finish taming it, just to find it stuck in the fucking floor. Are you fine? What's the matter with you, Ark? I just want a dragon, man! And even when I found another one nearby, it was only level 40. So yet again, I would need to shelf the idea for a Zaldria dragon, as I ain't taming that shit. Returning back home in day 23, where I committed a white man from 200 years ago, and then got together the stuff that I would need to tame myself a Karkinos. Heading out ASAP to get to the islands where I knew I could find them at, which as soon as I entered the cove, I found one that was level 120. Setting up a trap in the back of the cave, luring it over, boxing that loser, and then shooting it in the face. But for some reason, it didn't knock it out. Not even doing a lick of torpor. So I repositioned the cannon cannon and shot him again, and it still didn't knock him out. So I tried again, and again got the same result, which at this point the dude was almost dead, but luckily I had some spare sacrifices in my inventory, so I went ahead and used one of them to heal the crab to try again, though at this point I only had one cannonball left, one shot to bring it down, so I repositioned the cannon one more time and took the last shot. Which thankfully it worked, knocking out and taming my new crab boy. Naming them I Have Crabs. What? It's true. I have a crab. I have crabs. Bro, what the fuck do you... And now with the crab in my inventory, I went about getting the final harvester I needed, a deer. So I went to try and find one in the snow biome. There, I wasn't able to find a good one, so I then went to the canyon in hopes of finding one there. But there was only one female, which I only found due to the Dino Finder mod. So I went back to the snow to try and find one there again, where I finally managed to find a max level elk, which I kidnapped and brought back home. Getting back in day 24, knocking it out and waiting for them to tame, where a thought dawned on me. I was gonna need a saddle for that crab, and yeah, I was gonna need fungal wood and blue gems. Yeah, where the fuck is that? So I tried to do some research on it, but found no actual answers. So I decided to try and use common sense to find some on the map, which first led me to the underworld cave underneath the swamp castle, as not only was it a large underground cavern-esque area, it was also one of the only other spots where Karkino spawned. So if I figured the resources were anywhere, it'd be there. Heading out with Big Bird and arriving at one of the entrances on the side of a mountain, where I decided to make a backup save as I heard rumors of when you entered caves, it would break your game. Then heading in with Stalker to run the cave, finding a really good sleepy boy almost immediately, which I wanted to tame, so I knocked it out, just for it to turn to night and for them to wake up. So therefore, I went throughout the cave to try and find anything that could give me the resources to craft the saddle I needed. Smacking trees in the cavern to get no fungal wood, smacking crystals, which only gave me regular crystal, smacking colorful things, which couldn't be harvested, and even as I scoured through the depths into day 25, I still couldn't find any resources. Which was disheartening, but I did have another spot in mind, so I wasn't panicking just yet. But to not make this endeavor in the cave a complete waste, I went around trying to find the 2 artifacts that could be located in here. But even as I scoured through the whole cave, getting lost in the coiling tunnels and expansive caverns, I found myself incapable of finding either of them. So I decided to just leave the cave to go to that other spot, which the place I had in mind was the same place where the glow pets that had been added now spawned. Which if they could spawn there, why not the resources I needed? Which this was located in a ruin just north of the Wyvern Cove, embedded at the top of a cliff underneath a waterfall. Entering the ruin to find all the glow pets, some aberrant dodos, and an awesome tribute wall, but no resources. And I couldn't think of anywhere else on the map for them to spawn, so I tried to do even more research. But even into day 26, I couldn't find any answers. So I deduced that Wildcard probably made an oversight and didn't actually add the resources to the map. Fucking Wildcard, man! So as a last resort, I decided to do something I had never done before. I decided to make my way to the obelisk, stash my gear into my creatures, and to try and upload my character to Aberration. So we back in Ab, boys. What's up? Oh, wait, there isn't any easy way to upload the gear I put into the obelisk. I guess I'm doing some grinding. So I tried to gather some resources to start, just for the game to crash, which when I got back on, I found that it deleted my survivor. But it's fine. It's fine, cause I made that backup save. Though loading that up took us back to day 24. Now let's do a Moon Knight real quick, speeding up time to get us back to the end of day 25. And after exhausting all of my options, I decided if Ark was gonna dick me like that, I was gonna dick back and spawn myself the resources that I needed for the saddle. Honestly, I can't really feel bad about this one, figuring that this was a massive oversight on Wildcard's part, and was honestly kind of bullshit, but whatever. I went back home to craft the saddle and mount my new crab boy. Oh, that sounds wrong. Now I had all the tools and harvesters that I would ever need for this build project. So with that, I went about starting. First going about getting the massive amount of stone, wood, and fiber that I would need for the project. Using that baby Bronto that I had totally just adopted to use as a resource stash for my wood, as I knew I would likely need to get more with the dairy while building. And it was now that I remembered about that Dreadmare altar that I had gotten earlier, which Nightmare in Extinction was such an amazing companion for grinding there, so I decided that I wanted to add that to my crew here. Grabbing the altar and some tributes, and then heading down the beach to place the altar, just for it to say that I had to wait until night. So in the meantime, I went back to my wood harvesting, smacking trees into the evening and night, where I went about trying to summon the Dreadmare at the altar, just for it to say that it was still day, and then for it to not give me an option to summon at all. The altar was broken, so I couldn't get a Dreadmare. Nothing I could do about that, so I went back to my grind, getting more resources until I was content with what I had and tried to figure out what I wanted to build. Yeah, I have no fucking clue. Maybe a castle? I don't know. I guess I'll just grind until I can think of something. So that's what I did. Where while I was getting a bunch of wood, I found a huge red Uptrid, which I thought was an alpha, but in fact found that it was just a beefy boy. So I went ahead and tamed it because I thought it looked neat. Then in day 27, I went out with the Megaloceros to get the thatch for the build, but I found that I harvested more on foot, so I just did that instead. Finishing up the run with what I thought was enough, so I went about crafting some foundations to try and free build to come up with something for my build, as I still didn't really have a concrete idea of what I wanted, only knowing that I wanted it to have a castle aesthetic. First struggling to find where I wanted to put it, but in day 28, I found the spot where I wanted to put it down. So I began placing out an outline of foundations to make something. Still don't know what, but that's what I did. And thankfully placing those did help, as it started to give me a vision of what I wanted. The idea being kind of like a stone manor kind of thing, with some outer jutting rooms, a central hall, and even a tower. And this is where I did a bunch of building. So we're going to do a bit of a throwback and do a build montage, which if any of you get bored or don't want to watch the build montage, just skip to the time on screen. Now, without further ado, here's your build montage.
What the fuck do you think you're doing?
Can I touch it, please?
You son of a bitch!
Is it okay if I touch you?
Are you fucking kidding me?
Okay, I cannot ignore it any fucking longer. Those scorpion chitin back pieces of shit were pissing me off. So in a rage, I decided to postpone building to go out and get something to help defend base. First clearing out as many Utrid as I could with jawline, though there were so many I physically couldn't kill them all. Then heading out to try and find some ant hills, as I wanted to tame an ant queen to use their defensive hive abilities to protect my base. Finding a few in the hills, breaking their nests, kidnapping their queens, only two unfortunately, bringing these ant queens home to set up some defenses on the shore to try and combat all these attacks that I had been dealing with, and then with that situated, I thusly went back to building, placing out the outer structure of my home, crafting more and more structures to place more and more structures, where I was struggling to figure out how to implement the tower into my build, which eventually I determined that I wasn't smart enough to figure that out, so I went ahead and tore it down. But with that, I was able to go about finishing the rest of the structure in day 33. Finally finishing the outer structure of the build, this being one of my most ambitious structures I've ever made thus far, and while kinda amateur as I suck at building, it was still pretty cool, but I wasn't quite done yet as I still needed to make the interior, which inside I wanted to make it 2 floors, with the second story being a loft-like overlook kind of thing. Not really good at explaining it, but luckily you're not blind, you can see what I'm doing. And if you are blind, I'm sorry. Finishing that, and then going about the furnishing with structures in day 34. Moving my fabricators into the new structure, then placing some fireplaces for a dragon hatchery, that spoilers I would never use, and placing the new indie forge into the middle of the room, using the metal that I had gotten when I first tested out Death to put the forge to use, which I wanted to get my hands on some more industrial gear. The main next goal being a chem bench, which needed electronics, so I went about crafting those, putting down some lights while I waited for it, and then taking time to awe at my finished work. It looks decently okay, I think. Which, with the base now built, I decided to take yet another shot at getting a Zoldra dragon, heading out in day 35, and arriving at the border mountains where I found the floor dragon, where I decided to implement the same strategy which allowed me to get Gigas on extinction. Genocide! Going around the mountains, looking and looking, killing anything that flew, including some Drakara, which were another modded creature which I had added for this playthrough, eventually managing to get a dragon to spawn, though it was an alpha. And then I found another one, but this time it was stuck in the floor like a fucking idiot. Dumbass, hoe-ass, scaleback, mofo looking alpha hat, oh habit. And I went on and on and on and on and on, looking and killing, growing more and more exhausted. But just as I was about to give up, I finally found one. An ancient Zoldra dragon, in fact. Which, while the odds for taming one of such class was heavily against me, I decided to make a gamble and take my chances trying to tame it. Waiting for it to land, coming before it, feeding it some raw mutton, then feeding it some living mutton. Which my gamble paid off, baby! Who said gambling destroys your life? This ancient titan of a dragon heeded and accepted me, allowing me to start the second part of the taming process, which, much like the Rexes in Akarcha, it demanded blood. So I went out to commit to the hunt, though unlike the aforementioned dinosaurs, it took a lot more to appease this titan. Going into day 36, killing as many things as I could get this monster's jaws onto, but eventually I managed to tame my very first Zoldra dragon, naming this monstrous draconic ally Zolgar. Though while I was going on a killing spree, I had spotted a decent few golems, which I wanted to try and kill. Not with Zolgar though, but with death. Unleashing my first monstrosity and going out to kill the living rocks, which, as if the Deathworm wasn't OP already, it ignored the armor buff on the golems, hitting for full damage. Oh my god, bro, this dude's too busted! Which with that, I was content, so I finally made my way back home. Getting back home, where I went about finishing the furnishing on my new crafting hall, adding a chemistry bench, an industrial cooker, an indie grill, and a bunk bed, only to get interrupted by a Utrid attack again. Using the grill to get my big back self a couple 100 pounds of meat, and then using the chem bench to use my on-hand supply of flint and stone to make a bunch of spark powder. But now with the trophy team that I wanted for the playthrough, I would need to start making actual progress towards beating this map, which involved running the caves, which for those, I would need to get some caving mounts, which I had 2 in mind. Heading out in day 37 to go down to the desert for my first pick, the old faithful Thyla. Heading down to the desert archipelago in the furthest south, where I went about looking and found a level 125 Paleo Thyla, which I went about knocking out and taming, naming them Thyle, which then I realized that the other thing that I wanted to tame would need stuff from home, so I had to go back and get that real quick. Which I'm done edging y'all on what I'm talking about. I wanted to tame a Dracovinator, a deadly creature I had spotted out in the desert, which looked really good and looked like a powerful combatant mount that was about the size of a Carno, which if people can use Carnos in caves, why not this thing? Which to tame one of these was a simple knockout, but the not so simple part was what they ate, which according to the Steam page was Wyvern eggs or an Alpha Dracovinator trophy, which lucky for me, I had both at home, grabbing them in day 38 and then heading right back out to go to the dunes, arriving and using death as my main mount to go searching for my future companions. Finding an Alpha Dracovinator, which more trophies for taming couldn't hurt, so I went about dragging it to hell. Every time I use this worm, it gets more and more busted. Like for example, just a little later, I found and killed a Titanosaur, like it was child's play at that. I mean, what the hell is this dude? And mind you, this is 2 times nerfed compared to Extinction. 2 times! Bro, it could have been so much worse, dude. From there, heading out for more killing. Bye-bye, Acro! Finding myself a level 140 female Draco, yes, that's the abbreviation I'm using, which I went about trying to knock out as my first tame. Though this bitch was terrifying. Though I managed to knock it out regardless, using the trophy to instant tame her. Good to know about that, which unfortunately her melee was garbage, but that health goes stupid. So I went out to try and get another one with better melee, finding a male level 120, which I went about getting. Though it turned out kinda ass when it tamed. So more looking we go, coming across an Alpha Edmontosaurus in day 39, which I sent to the Shadow Realm for EXP. Though unfortunately at this point, I wasn't really finding any good wild Dracos that were up to my standards, which was starting to make the search a little bit more laborious. So when I found a level 125 male, I decided to take a gamble on taming it and hoping that his stat roll would give me a good melee stat, going about knocking it out where it nearly killed me. But I did manage to knock it out and go about taming it, using Wyvern eggs to test how effective they were, which they were well enough, but the stats weren't the best, so I went back to the search. Finding another Alpha Dracovinator.
Goodbye, my nigger. Back to the lobby.
And then another.
Stop!
And then found a level 140 male Draco that was in kind of a dangerous place, so I lured it away to try and tame it. But this little git was a bloodthirsty bastard, picking fights with literally everything. Though eventually I managed to isolate it and knock it out, taming up my new companion, which it ended up with some pretty solid melee, but I wanted to try and spin the roulette one more time with a level 135 female I had spotted, which it too was bloodthirsty and a pain in my ass, but I managed to knock it out and tame it, just for its stats to be less than desirable. So with that, I decided to take what I had gotten and make the most of it. finally leaving the desert and heading back home. Getting back in day 40, where after putting out my new stuff, I realized I would need Noviraptor. So I went out and down the beach to get some, taming one and finding another stuck on the floor. So with the one that I had, I went about caging it and starting the breeding operation for the Dracos, using the female with the 49 health stat and a male with a melee stat of 35, which was the best I got. Oh right, Thylas, yeah, we should probably get on that. So I went out to the desert islands to find some, thankfully finding a male level 115 Paleothyla in day 41, which I went about taming, but honestly I needed a female, so I went looking while I waited, clearing through any bad Thylas for their tributes, and while looking I came across some Pyroraptors, another addition from the Prehistoric Beast series of mods, which thankfully they were low level, which that sounds dumb until you hear why I wanted to kill them. As to tame a Pyroraptor, it was much the same as a Dracovinator, but instead of a trophy or eggs, I needed to give it a flame feather, which you could only get from killing Pyroraptors. So now with these two feathers, I could actually get some if I came across any good ones. And then the Thyla tamed, and it was mid, so I went back out looking. Scouring over the islands where, unrelated to the game, one of the people in chat gave me my very first donation, which I have to take some time during this video to thank them for their support, as it truly heralds the potential that this channel has and shows just how much y'all support me, which I cannot thank enough for. And I thank you personally, Boss Sam, for the donation that you made. And eventually I found a level 130 regular male Thyla, which I knew I wouldn't be able to use for breeding with my current ones, but in case I found another good female regular one, I decided to tame it, which thankfully just after I managed to find that, I found just that, knocking it out as well and waiting for both of them to tame, which while waiting for that, I managed to find some really decent Pyroraptors, nabbing myself a really good breeding pair of them, which was cool, but I never really used them. And eventually those two Thylas tamed, but they were kinda lackluster, so I went about trying to find some more, which finally I found a level 145 female Paleothyla, which was just the thing that I needed. So I knocked it out and went about taming it, finally getting my Thyla in day 42, where it turned out okay. Enough to justify using for breeding, but nothing really special. So I decided to make my way home, just to get distracted by a level 135 male Rex, which, yeah, I needed that as, you know.
You're going to Brazil!
So yeah, I went about taming it and bringing it with me on my journey back home, getting there where I went about getting the breeding operations for the Rexes and Thylas up and running, crafting myself an egg incubator as well, which returned to Ark with Ragnarok and would prove to be an extremely useful tool, placing it inside my new warehouse and then getting my first baby Thyla, imprinting it as I waited for eggs to collect, which if you couldn't figure by the fact that I set them to breeding, I wanted my army for the boss fight to be comprised of Evo Rexes, as that would be cool. So I went about focusing my attention on them in day 43, hatching some babies and working on breeding my creatures, using the male Rex and Stalker as a platform, which they soon managed to get a bunch of baby Rexes, which had two females which were good enough to replace Stalker. So I went ahead and pulled her out and put the babies out to grow, which then I got some really good Dracos, which would be good enough to replace the current breeding rotation, so I swapped them out. And then I got a replacement Thyla, which in a matter of 20 minutes I had single-handedly halted all of my breeding for the time being. So in lieu of that, I decided to go and try and get some more artifacts, heading out to go and rerun the Underworld Cave for the artifacts of the Cunning and the Immune. Heading in through the swamp entrance, we're eventually going through the cave with Big Bird, I managed to find the artifact of the Cunning up in a pocket room, and then shortly after I found the Immune in one of the lower chambers, successfully adding 2 more artifacts to my collection. Heading back home to check on the baby Rexes, which by now had grown up. So I set them up for breeding, which while waiting for eggs, I decided to take some time to get artifact pedestals. But for that, I would need a lot more obsidian, so I went up into the snow to try and find some, placing down an oil rig, which I pulled out of my ass. Being real, I have no idea where I got this, but I didn't find much up there. So I moved to my attention to the volcano, which you'd think there'd be some there, but I couldn't spot any, so I went to go to the desert's edge, arriving in day 44, where finally I found some to harvest, getting some and making my way back home.
Holy shit, that looks gorgeous!
Arriving and immediately hatching out some baby Rexes and Dracos, which from the first batch, I managed to get a perfect duo of babies, which I decided they would be perfect for my caving endeavors. I also had gotten a perfect replacement male, which fulfilled the prime trio that I was trying to make, which also stunted my breeding operations once more, so I went to prioritize the Thylas again, just to get a male Thyla, which also paused the breeding rotation. So I was waiting again. At least it gave me time to craft those pedestals. 10 in total for all the artifacts that I needed, which were as follows. The 3 I'd gotten so far, which were the Strong, Cunning, and Immune, and then the other 7, which were the Devourer, located at the bottom of the ocean, the Pack, which could be found at the Iceworm Queen Cave, the Hunter, which was within the bowels of the Lava Cave, and the final 4 being those within the Labyrinth Cave, the Skylord, the Clever, the Massive, and the Devious in particular, which for the looming challenges ahead, I went about preparing some saddles for my future mounts, getting together 2 Dracovinator saddles and finding an Ascended Thyla saddle, which I must have gotten while looting. And yes, I know I've been purposely skimming past all of my loot goblin shenanigans, but after 900 Days-esque videos where I mention it constantly, I've gotten rather tired of doing that. So yeah, no more mentioning loot unless it's really important. So with the saddles and the 2 Dracos grown up and nothing else to do, I went about running the first of the caves. First setting out to the Iceworm Queen Cave, which was just in the mountain snows above my base. Finding the entrance of the cave and setting up my first Draco to help me run the cave, naming her Darax, and entering the first chamber of the icy caverns, which she almost immediately immediately proved extremely viable and made my decision to get the Dracos a clear good one. Working my way through the first chambers with ease and then getting into the second part of the cave where the Deathworm spawned. And honestly, I was petrified and instilled with PTSD from the desert, terrified of the possibility that these guys were like the untamable variants, but thankfully they were vanilla. So I went through the cave, clearing through worms, grabbing some man loot, and eventually finding my way to the final chamber and the boss room of the Queen, which my plan was to use the Dino Balls to get my Dracovinator through the Dino barrier. But when I walked through, the Dino Balls didn't work. So I was face to face with the Queen with nothing but my shotgun. Too bad buckshot beats worm, bitch! I am so lucky I had that gun, making this fight rather trivial and allowing me to get some okay loot from beating her and acquire myself the artifact of the pack. By the way, bullshit, that pushover got a giga. I call bullshit, there's no way. So I left the cave in day 45, which left me stuck in the canyon as Big Bird was still at the cave entrance. And because I didn't know how to get out, it took me a pretty long time to find my way out of the canyon. But eventually I did find my way out, up the hills, over the bridges into the cave where Big Bird was located, heading home to clear out my inventory and to try and repair the armor which the Queen broke, which for my armor I would need a bunch of pearls. And unluckily for me, I had an infestation of living pearl banks just down the water. So I went on a purge. Oh my god, there's even more! Why is there more every time? Why is the ocean nothing but chitin? And while doing that, one of these chitin back bug bitch sea slug wannabe scorpion cunt bastards killed my fucking Bronto! Bro! But at least I was able to get a ton of resources from them, but also too bad my gear also needed polymer to be repaired, so I couldn't do that. But whatever. As I went to the next cave regardless, arriving at the entrance of the lava cave in day 46, using the other Draco this time, which I decided to name Barbarian. Though pretty quickly I put them away as this cave was far more cramped than the others, so I resorted to using my grapples to Spider-Man my way through, avoiding all the nasty creatures and jumping my way to the artifact of the hunter in no time. However, I was not done with this cave, for there was a fate to run, locating the secret entrance to the lava golem arena, which I wanted to try and use Jawline and her bone crunch ability to try and kill it. So with her, I went about fighting this massive magma in rock, which unfortunately very quickly turned sour as the golem's damage resistance heavily impeded her ability to kill it, and the golem's own fire abilities were very quickly melting through Jawline's health. So with no other choice, I had to call for help, bringing forth death. Which, if you remember what I learned earlier, proved to take this fight from a near loss to kicking a coughing baby down a flight of stairs. This golem did not stand a chance, as it died almost in seconds. So now I was content to leave the cave. So now I was left with 5 artifacts to get. One which was at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, nah, not doing that yet. And the other 4 which were contained within the labyrinth cave, which was a puzzle cave, which I fucking hate! But alas, I had no choice. So I decided to head in prepared, getting together some sets of armor, crossbows, structures for a fob, and a ton of beds, along with some extra materials which would help me make utility plus grapples in case I died in the cave, and with that, I went out. Arriving before the entrance of this abominable cave in day 47, building up the fob which I would use to run this cave, setting up my Veilwind to assist me in the cave, planning to use their companion ability to help me smuggle in a dino into the final room, and then entering the cave, which I spent days 47, 48, and 49 running this bullshit-ass cave, bro. I hate these dudes. First, figuring out how to get through the annoying puzzles, evading dumb bullshit, and of course getting my shit absolutely ran. Which pretty quickly I lost my patience, and after dying another time, I decided to break the rules. Totally not just ghosting through the walls of the cave, and totally not just getting to back where I died. I mean, what? No, I never died. You better not rat me out, you dumb. Which this started a trend that would continue throughout my time in this cave. So I went on, finally getting to the actual labyrinth within the cave, where following a tutorial, I managed to get through the maze. Not without getting lost a ton and the tutorial confusing me a bit, but eventually I managed to get through and acquire me the first artifact of 4, the artifact of the clever, which then took me to the sacrifice room, which I had decided to use one of the Utrid that I had tamed to get through it, throwing my scorpion into the sacrificial pit, just for it to do nothing. Nope. Nuh-uh. Fuck no. So I went through to the final chambers of the cave, finally getting to the Cave of Spirits, where I would need to fight the phantoms of the cave to unlock access to the artifacts. But first I needed to wait for my Veilwind to respawn so I could get my Dracovinator from its inventory, which if you already know the companion mechanics, you already know how this turns out. For when my Veilwind returned to me, its inventory was empty, meaning that I had nothing to run this cave, and that I had lost one of my best creatures. So, using some loot and tools I had been collecting while running this cave, I went about angering the spirits and going about fighting them, which at first was going well, but slowly they got stronger, and then one of them got stuck in the terrain, which I only figured out because I could hear it making noise through a wall, which when I killed that summoned the rest of the beasts, which were even stronger and killed me. Nope. Fuck nope. I hate these caves, bro. I hate these. And it wasn't even... Ugh. I was not about to let myself endure an hour of torture just to get unrewarded. I don't care. I despise these caves. They are not fun. They are not enjoyable. I fucking hate them and do not regret what I thus did. Fed up, I went about just cheating my way through the cave. I don't fucking care. I don't care. I don't. Getting my body back, then the two artifacts in the room, which were the Devious and the Massive, and then left the cave promptly. Just to remember that there was one more artifact. No. I was fucking done with this cave. I was done. So I just goes through the walls and got the artifact of the Skylord. I was done. I am done. I hate these hoe-ass caves, bro. Why? In a game that's extremely buggy and has some of the most incoherent physics like Ark, it makes no fucking sense for there to be Death Zone puzzle caves like this one. I get it. Make it interesting and difficult. I get it. But fuck that. I do not play Ark to endure cock and ball torture for hours on end in this way. So no, I don't regret it. I fucking hate that cave. And as a matter of fact, from now on, if there is a cave like that in another map, I now fourth institute a rule where if I can't run a puzzle cave in 3 tries, I will just cheat through it. I won't get any loot, but I will get the artifacts because I fucking hate these fuck-ass, bum-ass, hoe-ass, bullshit motherfucking caves. Though, after returning home on day 50, I did and do acknowledge how cheaty that is. And that, yes, it is technically a skill issue, even though I don't fucking care. But to be fair, I decided, as penance, to kill all my Rexes, par stalker, who I forbade from breeding from now on, and completely started my Rex army breeding from scratch. Which honestly, I think it's worth it to spare myself the torture of running that cave even one more time. However, if you don't like that and do want me to actually do the cave in the future, if this video gets 1,000 likes, yes, that's how much I don't want to do this, but if it does, I will get back on the world and run the cave again completely legit. Doing it no matter how long it takes until I complete the cave and get all the artifacts. Which if we end up doing that, that'll be its own stream and video, but our agreement, 1,000 likes, y'all better clutch up. But now that those Rexes were dead, I would need new ones to make the army to fight Nunatak. So I went ahead and went out to go and find some new ones to tame, using the Dino Finder to locate some level 145 Rexes across the map, so I began my journey to go get them. Though on my way, I found a really good level 135 male Rex that was next to an alpha. So I went ahead and kidnapped them, dropped them on a separate beach, and then killed the alpha with Zulgar. Going back to that Rex where I went about taming it, which went well, and after doing some killing, I managed to tame it, only to find that its stats were really mid. So yeah, that guy was a waste of time. Heading back on my journey to the level 145 female Rex, which I found in the fields of the Green Ob, around a bunch of dangerous creatures. So I kidnapped it and took it to a safer spot in the plains, going about the taming process, giving it food, and then waiting for it to ask me for some more. But while I was following her, I accidentally punched her, which enraged her and lowered her taming effectiveness. Luckily though, when she did tame, it didn't actually harm her all that much. As when she did tame, she ended up getting a health stat of 43, which meant all I really needed was a good melee male Rex. So I went out to look, finding another level 145 female Paleo Rex in day 51, which unlike the rest of the Paleo variants, this one can breed with normal Rexes, so I decided to go ahead and tame this one too, going about the process and taming her up just to find that she was mid. So I went back out looking, finding another male, which I went about taming as well, but I moved while it was roaring, which pissed it off. Though after de-aggroing it, I went about taming it up, and finding that yet again, it was a mid as hell Rex.
Bro! Oh, you know this is what I deserve. But please!
But I was tired of looking, so I decided to take what I had. Though I think Ark was trying to console me, as near where I tamed the Rex I found a max level Drakara, which I thought would be a really cool addition to my tribe, which I could play around with. So I decided to head home to figure out how to tame it, and to get the things that I needed to tame it, which I found to tame it. I would need ether spray in order to pacify it, and then a special food item to feed and tame it, which after setting up the Rexes to breed, I went about getting that together, just to find that I would need bug repellent and biotoxin to make it, which while I had most of the stuff I needed for the repellent, I had no biotoxin at all, which meant I would need to take a dip into the water. And I decided to make the most of that, planning on heading out on an expedition into the water with Jawline to get both some biotoxin and to try and get some tames that would assist me in locating and collecting the final artifact, the artifact of the Devourer, which I knew was located in a trench infested with Tusoteuthis. But for some reason, I really found nothing down there. Only an annoying amount of sharks, Xiphactinus, and eels, and the occasional jellyfish. But even into day 52, I didn't really find anything of interest. No Mosas, no Tylosaurs, maybe the occasional Fleazy or Bacillo, but nothing else. These oceans were dead, which this continued even into day 53, where I still found nothing. So much searching that I wanted to even claw my own eyes out.
Bruh, what the hell, wild card? Where's my stuff at?
Or maybe the mod authors, I don't know, because yeah, I forgot to mention that I also had the Evo Moza mod, but that doesn't really matter much to me when I can't fucking find one. And eventually I finally gave up on the search and left the ocean with the scant bit of biotoxin that I was able to collect. Returning home where I went about crafting the bug repellent and using these resources to craft a couple ether spray and Drakara feed. Then heading out to go and try and find that Drakara again, which while I was out looking for where I thought it was, I ended up finding another high level female that had some solid raw melee, which it was next to an alpha, so I had to kill that. But when I finished with that, I went about taming the female Rex, which at this point y'all know how this goes, finishing the tame to find that my time spent on her was completely worth it, as she got 42 into melee. So with that, I went back out to look for the Drakara, which I did find and tamed it, but honestly, it wasn't really anything special in my opinion. Kinda cool, but when you already have a living nuke, it doesn't really mean anything. So I went back home in day 54 and went about continuing the breeding of the Rexes, where one of the eggs I hatched had gotten 2 of the best stats from the female I already had, which meant I had a way to seamlessly transition the old rotation stats into this new female's melee stat, or simply put, I'm a commit a felony with dinosaurs. And since now I was waiting for eggs to lay, I decided to head out on a taming run, wanting to get some griffins as they were the staple creature of Ragnarok, and to not tame any would be a disservice. And I figured I could test out their new ability to be able to breed, so I went out to try and find some, messing with some low levels near the beaver dams, and eventually finding some decent ones on the border of the green out plains, which I went about knocking out and taming 2, which were conveniently a breeding pair, which at the request of chat, when the first one tamed, I named it Hawks, which this word woke me up like a sleeper agent, cause it immediately made me want to name the other griffin something along the lines of Hawk Tua, which when it did, I came to name it Hawk Tua or Talk Tua. Yes, I'm funny, I know. So with those, I went back home ASAP to get those guys breeding, working on both some griffin babies and continuing with the work for the Rexes as well, which speaking of, I had managed to get an amazing baby Rex that had gotten a perfect combination of all its parent stats, turning out to be level 240. So stage 1 of the prime pair was set. I also hatched out a griffin, which I named
Peter, the horse is here.
I know, I'm a comedic genius, you don't have to remind me. And then another baby griffin, which chat asked me to name, like, and subscribe. Which yeah, you should all do that. Please, I beg, like at the very least, please. Don't let YouTube let this video flop, please! And so I went on breeding the Rexes to try and get a replicate female for my new baby male Rex, which took a bit longer than I wanted as most of the eggs that I got were shit. But in day 55, I finally got the male that I needed. The prime pair of Rexes were now complete, and all I had to do was wait for them to grow up. So I decided to take out the Griffin, which I had changed the name to Jeffrey Says Like and Subscribe. Yes, do that, by the way. To head out on a taming spree, wanting to go to the desert to try and tame it at Monte with an electric prod that I don't remember where I got. So I went out looking in the desert, finding one which was decent, and then trying to knock it out, only for the prod to not fully do so, and it was my only one. Well, no mono for me, I guess. So I went around looking through day 56 with Death for something to do, but really there wasn't anything, and I was just kind of padding for time. So I went back home and went about hatching some more of the baby Rexes, specifically one that I could use as a new pocket, which I quickly got and hatched, where I gave them a name suggested by chat. Shut! Behold! The Orphaninator! Though with the prime pair ready, and nothing but grinding to do on land, I decided to take another attempt at searching throughout the ocean for a creature to assist me in finding the artifact. Heading down there and scouring through the bottoms of the ocean on and 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 on just to have the same exact result as last time. Even into day 58, I found nothing of note. Except the fucking artifact! What the hell, dude? Bruh, Ark. What are you doing to me, dude? How do I stumble upon the artifact before a Moza or even a Tylosaur, dude? How? Like, bro, there was only a single shit level Tuso there. It's supposed to be infested. What do you mean this is where the artifact is? Which meant now I had all 10 artifacts. But since I knew that I was gonna need to go tribute hunting down the line, I decided to continue looking around for things that I could use for hunting, lowering my standards from a Moza to whatever was even remotely strong. Finding a level 125 effectiveness, which I tamed and named Bitish Fish, then a level 150 Pleasy, which will never be mentioned again because I really don't like Ark's iteration of the Plesiosaur. Like, seriously, TLC this one, it's right fucking here! And then a max level Bitish Fish, and then some Archelon in day 59, which I can't even be happy about taming my first turtles because I won't ever be able to use these guys because they're literally fucking useless for what I need them for. And then some Ammonites. Whatever. And then in day 60, I found some Cryptocleidos from one of the Aquatic Editions Evo mod, which it was pretty decent level and could be useful, and I knew how to tame one, so I went ahead and tamed it. And then found nothing else, so since I was fed up, I decided to just head home absolutely exhausted. But now with all 10 artifacts, all I needed now was the complementing tributes, which thankfully I'd been collecting various ones throughout the playthrough, so I had already made pretty good progress on that mark, though I only really had a rough idea of what I actually needed, so I took an inventory of what I already had, and then went to the Blue Obelisk to compile compile a proper list for myself to go and collect what I needed, finding that I would need 25 Sarco scales, 21 Basilo blubber, which were daunting, 17 Tuso tentacles, which were also daunting, 1 Thyla claw, 10 Soro vertebrae, 14 Spino sails, 5 boa venom, and 25 Megalania toxin, which I was not too eager to take a dip into the water so soon already, so I decided to start working on the land creatures, first with the Sarco scales, as I wanted to get those ASAP, having PTSD from extinction, which honestly, in hindsight, I had no reason for concern, figuring that Rag has one of the most population-dense swamps in the game. So I went out to head to the swamp, killing Brontos along the way, where I arrived and went on Jawline to go on a killing spree, until I found a male Deinosuchus that had 30 raw melee, which prompted me a very tempting idea, to get an imprinted baby Deinosuchus for the boss fight, as their crunch ability was insanely OP on high health targets. Though I didn't have anything for the tame, so I paused my murder spree to go get what I needed, which was ghillie gear and mutton, which the ghillie gear needed organic polymer, so I went down to head to the southern archipelago as I was collecting tributes. Getting to the Crab Cove in day 61, deep frying a crab in blood, and then heading out for mutton, not before crossing Thyla claws off my list. Killing some sheep near the dunes, which how they spawn there, I don't know, but they're there, and then heading back to the swamp to find that level 130 male, which I had completely lost, instead finding a level 140 with 28 melee. So, whatever, close enough, let's try and get that one. Going about trying to tame it, sneaking to its mouth, stuffing it with mutton, then running away like a little bish, rinse, repeat. Eventually taming the boyo, where it ended up getting a melee stat of 44, which I was more than content with. So I went back to getting more Sarco scales as I needed to finish that task, which while on the murder, I came across my first Rhinio Anatha, which had been added to Rag in a post-release update. So I killed it to get my first pheromone, which just a little further on, I found another one that was female and level 115. So wanting that desperately, I decided to take one of the Rexes that were in my inventory, for some reason, to try and tame it. But while I was feeding the Rex the pheromone, I'm pretty sure I got killed by a Deinosuchus, so when I exited the Rex's inventory, I found there was no longer a Rhinio and that I had completely wasted that pheromone. But now knowing that they could spawn, and that they spawn somewhat commonly, I decided to try and clear spawns to force another one to spawn, where I did eventually manage to do that, getting a female level 130 to spawn, but I still needed a pheromone. So I kept on looking, where in day 62, I finally found a male, killing it, and a second one that I found to get 2 pheromones. So I went to go and try and tame that female, feeding the Rex the pheromone, and getting the Rhinio Anatha below 10% health, where I waited for it to impregnate my Rex, but instead it ran a fade with a Derposaur and got itself killed. And unfortunately, despite my searching, I wasn't able to find another one. So I went home, which having felt comfortable with the progress I had made thus far with tributes, having crossed off Soro vertebrae, boa venom, Sarco scales, and Thyla claws off my shopping list, I decided to focus some time on actually breeding out the army for the boss fight, which at this moment my plan for the boss fight was simple. Bring army of Rexes, find Dragon Boy, swat Dragon Boy, crush his balls. But with this new Deinosuchus, I now wanted to add one more factor to my battle, getting an imprinted Deinosuchus to cleave through Nunatok's health. So while breeding Rexes in day 63, I also focused on trying to get a prime pair of Deinosuchus to get an OP crocodile, going throughout the day breeding and hatching and breeding and hatching and breeding and hatching baby Deinosuchus while I waited for the Rexes to lay me enough eggs for the Legion. Where finally in day 64, I was able to get the perfect Deinosuchus, a powerful little lad which I decided to name Ball Chomper Guy. That's exactly what he was gonna do. And the Rexes had managed to breed out enough eggs for the Legion, so I went about hatching them out and then throwing them in my Dino Depot balls, as not only did they grow up in the balls, I also learned that they got passive imprinting while within them as well, which was busted, but me like. So with the Legion done, it was time to go back to tribute hunting, and completely dreading the searching for water creatures, I decided to go ahead and finish up the rest of the land creature tributes that I needed. So I went forth with Zolgar, first trying to get some Megalania toxin that I needed, which for that I went to the northern shores before the volcano, where I did manage to get a decent view, but not enough, so I started making my way towards the desert as I knew a place down there where they could spawn. But passing by the highlands on my way, I ended up spotting an Evo Giga, though it was low level and low key I wanted to save that for my island series. So I went about trying to kill it with Death, which did not go as well as I wanted, and while yes I was able to kill it, Death took a staggering amount of damage from that monster, getting over half of its health melted. Death has 100,000 health. That was 50k damage from a level 25, bruh. What the fuck did I just add to my game? And thus went back on to try and get the tributes, stopping by the canyon on my way to the desert in day 65 to try and cross off Spino sails, getting what I thought I needed from the population of sailbacks, and then heading on my way to the desert, finding a shoreline shoreline just east of the Wyvern Cove, where I managed to get the last of the toxin that I needed. But that also meant that I only needed the water tributes left. So I went back home, where before I prepared for my task ahead, I went about leveling the Rexes up, and then went to prepare for the water journey ahead, gathering together a bunch of saddles for the creatures I wanted to use under there, including the Cryptocleidos, the Archelon, which I never actually used, and the Xiphactinus, which then I went and made the scuba tanks that I would need for the Endeavor, which was the last thing that I needed. So I headed out with my Cryptocleidos, which I decided to name Clyde, testing them out against the nearby fauna to find that they were kind of underwhelming. So I switched to the British fish, just to find that they were even more underwhelming. So again, I switched back to Clyde and began my tedious search for tributes. First going for Tuso tentacles, which I had hoped and prayed I could find enough of them at the trench where the artifact was, making my way there and arriving in day 66. What the fuck was that? Anyways, at the trench, I managed to thankfully find a plethora of Tusos, going about killing them using a hit-and-run tactics, as Clyde wasn't really strong enough to handle them one-on-one. Quickly getting all the tentacles that I needed, and even managing to tame myself a level 130 while I was down there. But alas, all that was left was the hardest part, the Basilo Blubber, which, to summarize, it took me the entire rest of today, day 67, and day 68 to get all the blubber that I needed. And I didn't even do it completely legit, for after going around for the entire map for hours on end, I had managed to only get 6 Basilos. Which, yeah, I was done with water spawns on this map. I don't know what the fuck you did, Wildcard, but you broke it. You broke it. So frustrated and not wanting to spend any more time in this boring-ass, fuck-ass, dead-ass ocean, I decided to spawn in the Basilos that I needed to kill, and honestly be happy that I even spawned them in living. That left no more tributes to collect on my journey to Ascension, so there was also nothing more to do. Returning home in day 69, where I decided to follow the old Let Death Draco tradition of fucking around for the last few days. So I went out to do some final joyride taming, mainly wanting to get my hands on a Rhinio, as I hadn't had one before, and this would probably be my last chance at getting one for a long time. So I went to the swamp to go and try and find some, immediately finding a level 135 female, which I had some leftover pheromone, and a spare Rex in my pocket, so I wanted that bitch. Or rather, its child to be exact, luring it from the dangers of the swamp to the fields of the new island, where I went about the process of feeding the Rex the pheromone, shooting the Rhinio down to 10% health, and then waiting for it to impregnate the Rex, which this time, it worked. Yes! I finally had one, waiting for its craving demand, which it wanted some steak, which, yeah, I cheated one in thinking I had one at base, which I don't even think is true, but it didn't even really make a difference, as the baby turned out level 58, but who cares, it's a fucking Rhinio. Cryo-balling my new comrade to let it grow while I explored some more, which with the ball chomper guy in my pocket, I decided to test him out a little. Cakewalk. Which done with that, I decided to leave. But a peek at the Dino Finder, which was working way better now that I had turned hibernation off, forgot to mention that earlier, I had managed to find a Drakeling, which of course I had to tame it, going through the method of waiting for it to ask me to get various XP, me doing what it asks, and then feeding it to tame it. So I went around with my new companion, having a little bit of fun for a while, and then in day 70, I headed to the desert to show some love to Orphanator as well, but nothing really happened. Which then I remembered, oh yeah, I would need a Yudi for the boss. So I went ahead and found one in the desert, which that meant I literally had no excuse to not run the boss. So, with a heavy heart, I made my way back home, arriving in day 71, where I went about making a saddle for the Rhinio, just so I could use it just a little bit before the end, gathering together the army, and then heading to the Blue Obelisk. Assembling my army and approaching the terminal. Fuck, I forgot the tributes. Fuck, I don't have enough Spino sails either. So yeah, I needed to get those real quick. Heading out with the Rhinio to the canyon to get the last sails that I needed, and then, in a setting sun, I made my way back, arriving at the obelisk to approach my final fight. After 71 days, 55 hours of gaming, and way too much bullshit for my own good, it was finally the end. My first journey on Ark Ascended on PC, my last journey on Rag for a long time to come, and a sorrow goodbye to this gorgeous map. Now was the time to fight Nunutok. Alright. Come on, Ball Chomper. Alright, come on, we got this, boys! We got this, boys! Whistle aggressive. Kill everything. Come on, you bitch. I don't have a flyer. Get down here, you son of a bitch. I do not have a flyer, you son of a bitch. Get down here. Get down here, boy. Take this ass whooping like a fucking man. Ball Chomper guy's gonna clip your nuts off, I swear. You coward.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
Here it comes. Oh, there we go. 18K, let's go. Oh, that hurt. Oh, that hurt. Is it hurting? No, it isn't. Oh, yeah. Oh, look at those damage numbers. Look at those damage numbers. Ball Chomper guy, you're clutching it. Get his ass. Oh, I missed it. Oh, I missed it. Oh, I missed it. I missed it. Ball Chomper guy, get them balls. Oh, I missed it. How'd I miss that? Land again, you no-balled bastard. Come and get your circumcision. Oh, I missed that? How did I miss that? Actually, I'm kind of getting anxious now. All right, let me just be patient about it. Fly right into me, boy. Just wait for you. Now! Yeah! There we go. We got him. He's good as dead. He's as good as dead. Let's go. There he goes! We got his bitches! Yeah! We got his bitches! Woo! Let's go! I hope you all enjoyed that video. I thank you all for the support as of late. Almost fully monetized, 2,000 views, and almost 800 watch hours on Extinction. It has been seriously staggering. But now, let's get to a bit of a tough pill to swallow about my opinion on Rag on ASA. So, let's just get this out of the way quick. It's a very beautiful map. Stunningly gorgeous, but in my personal opinion, I don't think I can call it my favorite anymore. The spawns are just way too wonky for me. The water was atrocious and boring. I hate that damn cave with a passion. And honestly, I've had better experiences on ASA than this. While Rag holds a special place in my heart, I can't call it my favorite map anymore. It's a masterpiece, but it's not perfection. And for now, I sit this OG Goliath down as a solid map, but definitely no longer the best. But what do I know? I'm as stupid as they come. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.